Hello, Twin Tails and Treasure Hunters. My name is TB Skyn, and the second episode of Sonic Mania Adventures is out. The animated shorts that Sega are producing to advertise Sonic Mania and indeed Sonic Mania Plus. And this just could not have come at a better time for me, because the last bunch of videos I've done have been largely critical and somewhat negative, and at this point I really need the palate cleanser of just being able to sit back and be unabashedly happy about something, because the Sonic Mania Adventures shorts make me happy. They are just, they're a joy to behold. They're just a confluence of a whole lot of stuff that I love. I love silent storytelling. I love the use of music to convey, mood as expressively, and sound effects as they do in these shorts. Unfortunately, we're not going to be listening to that because I'm going to be pausing and flip framing through it, and hearing the sound just go on and off all the time would be maddening. I love the limited animation that they use to convey their points, and just how effectively they use animation to do what they do. Because the thing about these shorts are that they are animated shorts, and they're made on a relatively low budget, and they're made with relatively small staffs of people. And what's so impressive about them is how much they get done with those limited resources. And that's always the thing that fascinates me in animation, is to take a look at what corners did they cut. Like where did they find a way to use less labor to get a similar effect? And that's just my jam. This is just a gush video. I'm just gonna be very happy in this video. Now, we've already talked a lot about how Sonic moves and how some of the visual storytelling between him and Eggman works. That was the primary stuff I ended up talking about in the previous video. So for this one, I think I'm going to talk about interactions between Sonic and Tails, and going to focus a little bit on the action, because there's a bunch of really good action comedy beats going on here that's kind of fun to explore the timing that they use for that. And of course, after the credits on this thing roll, which they're going to do very shortly, there's going to be a post-credit scene that I'm not going to show you, because you should go and watch this thing for yourself, because give it lots of views so they make more. I want a full animated show that looks like this. Because this is just happiness to me. I never played the original Sonic games on the Genesis back in the days when the Genesis actually existed. I didn't have, I was a Nintendo kid, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, and then transitioned into PlayStation. I never really got through the Sega phase. But I played the Genesis games later, and Sonic was always a sort of a big part of my memory of childhood, because the first video game I ever played was Sonic the Hedgehog on the Sega Master System. And this was, I got a Sega Master System while the Genesis was out, because they were cheaper, and my parents got me one, and it had Sonic the Hedgehog on it for this Sega Genesis. So I have a very special relationship with that version of Sonic, and that version of Sonic is a whole hell of a lot closer to this than he is to pretty much anything else in the Sonic canon. So this is just confluence of things that make me happy. Anyway, let's talk about Tails, and let's talk about limited animation here. Because you see how, like, Tails is working on the plane, and in reality, when he moves to... You can see the little tufts of hair actually pop into existence on top of his head, and you can see it's a relatively limited amount of frames that's being used to communicate his motion. And that's always the stuff that's fun for me to look at, is exactly, and I also love what they do with his expressions here. Take a look at how they move his eyes. To the left, and then this, a little smear frame that kind of smooths the transition over to the right. And then one smear frame to get him to look straight ahead again. And then we finally turn him around. And smear frames is something that's used really liberally and generously in these shorts. And again, you can see there's really not a lot of frames going on, but they do something quite clever. Because the camera is moving just a little bit, you can see as he lands, he stands still. But if I move forward and back one frame, you can see that there's this tiny little change in his positioning. And that also helps to smooth out the motion, despite the fact that, like, you can see this is there's really not a lot of animation frames to work with here, but in motion it still looks fairly smooth. And here we get the smear frames again. That's the thing I love paying attention to in these shorts, is the use of smear frames to smoothen out the motion, because all they really have for frames is 3 frames, this, and this. Like, the starting position, the smear frame, the end position. And they don't even really do a landing for it, which is slightly unusual. And the smear frame just helps smooth things out so substantially. It's such a wonderful trick for limited animation in order to just make things look a little smoother. But you can see little animation mistakes still happen. Look at Tails' glove on his left hand. That is the one that's to the right on the screen. You can see how the shadow disappears during the smear frame, and it's so brief that when you're just watching the animation, you don't really notice that it happens particularly. But nonetheless, this is the kind of stuff I love. I just love ooh, they made a little animation mistake there. For me, that's charming. That's not a flaw. That's charming. That's fun. That's interesting. Also notice what they do in order to get Tails' reaction to Sonic to work. Like, he doesn't just light up into a smile. The first thing he does, he sees Sonic, and then it's down, crouch, and then he kind of bounces back up and goes, yay! And there's a little bit of wonderful setup being done here for Sonic. You can see the way Sonic chooses to reintroduce himself to Tails is not to just walk up and say, hey, buddy, but it's to dash past him like super fast, exploiting his super speed, and then appearing on top of the plane like a cool guy going, hey, how you doing? I'm Sonic. I am a super cool dude. I am just the coolest guy in the entire goddamn universe. I do poses and I make cool hand gestures because I am rad as hell. And that's a little bit of setup that's going to be paid off in just a few moments. Let's see, is there anything interesting going on here? Not especially. I do love the, the interaction that's on display between Sonic and Tails, in the sense of how these two characters mirror each other. Like, you can see when Tails reacts with kind of childish joy, Sonic tries to play the cool guy. And that's just very briefly you get a sense of their relationship immediately upon that like when you see Sonic chooses to introduce himself to Tails that way, and Tails reacts like a child who has seen Santa, and Sonic just goes, hey. That's what I love about this silent acting, is like, there's not a single line of dialogue. No one says anything. Tails never says, oh, it's my friend Sonic. Hey, Tails, I'm the cool guy. Like, there's none of that. There's no need to explain. It just comes across in the motions, and that, so freaking gorgeous. I also love the animation of Sonic tottering here like he's about to fall, because unless I'm much mistaken, that is actually a fairly direct translation of one of his animation cycles in the Genesis games, where if you put him on the ledge of something where he's very close to falling over, he will actually do those same motions in the Genesis game as well. But also notice something else that's going on here. As the tremors are happening, notice who's moving. Sonic is. And that's a clever little camera trick, because if Tails was also kind of going, whoa, kind of wavering all over the place, he would be in the foreground. He would be the primary character, and he would distract the eye from the rest of the motion on the screen. That is Sonic doing his little motion, and the plane doing that little bobbing up and down. So by keeping Tails still until they finally get to react, you can see Sonic managed to finish all of his motion, all of his movement right here. There, he finishes, he gets to his standing pose before Tails finally reacts and moves, and another smear frame. They're so good. I love smear frames because you can just do whatever the hell you want with them sometimes. You actually have to be, that's a lie, actually. You have to be quite precise with smear frames. You have to be really careful that, like, when Tails' nose moves, it has to have a direct beeline from position A to position B in a way that smears, like, as though you had smeared the paint out with your hand in order to create that curve, right? So smears they're great opportunities to just loosen up and do crazy shit, but they also kind of have to be a little bit precise, otherwise they don't quite work. So let's see, what's the next interesting motion here? Oh, maybe when Sonic takes off, because if I don't miss my guess, here's another great smear frame. That's so good. And again, you can see Sonic, this is something we discussed in the previous one, before Sonic makes a move, there's always the wind-up. And that's general. Like, generally speaking, it's good to have a wind-up before a big motion. But something I've noticed about Knuckles in the Sonic Mania intro is that he doesn't really have wind-ups for a lot of the stuff he does, because he's so much heavier as a character, whereas the lighter characters like Sonic, like Tails, they tend to wind up more before their motions come through. And that's another way to communicate the difference between these three characters, despite the fact that Sonic characters from this era are all pretty similar in their construction. Like, they all have pretty similar body types, they all have pretty similar anatomies. Knuckles gets to be a lot heavier because he generally has less wind-up and he has less bounce back when he stops. Like, when he stops, it's not so much a kind of boing, it's more like a poof, he kind of lands. You can see that if you watch the Sonic Mania game intro once again. Is there anything in that movement Tails does when he reaches out with his hand? Not really. It's just kind of a standard motion. So, Eggman. By the way, once again, complex objects like machinery, like especially Eggman's machine, this is a 3D model. This is 3D rendered. And consequently, it moves a little bit differently than the rest of the characters in the scene. Like, because a 3D model will always move a lot smoother and a lot more precisely than hand animation does, because the computer does it mathematically perfectly. And that introduces a problem for the animators, because while it's fine to use 3D models in a 2D animation that works perfectly fine here, you have to be really careful about not making them seem completely and utterly out of place. Like, it really should not look like they come from two completely different universes that can't really coexist. So the animator's job on the 3D objects is to very carefully choose, like, exactly how to render these frames, like what's the timing going on here, how many frames are we going to use, so that the number of frames that the machine uses in its movements is sort of relatively congruous to the number of frames that a character would use to make that same movement. Like, as much as possible, they need to believably exist within the same physical universe. They need to believably follow the same physical rules of motion. And I really love the way that they've rendered these machines, because, again, my nostalgia itch is just getting tinkled all over the place with these machines, because they're exactly that kind of sort of odd 90s weird construction site vision of what futuristic tech would look like if created by a mad scientist. And I also love the little boil that they do with Eggman here. No, maybe not a boil, but that little bounce he's got going on as he's digging. You can kind of see he's just kind of going and that's always really part of Eggman's motion in the games as well. He tends to be very bouncy in the sense that he kind of, not in the sense that he actually jumps up and down, but he kind of bobs up and down, which is a wonderful part of his expression. Ooh, smear frame once again. You can see how they are. This is quite clever. See how when Sonic jumps up, his quills are kind of pointing downwards, and then as he lands, the quills kind of trail behind him. And that kind of helps sell the arc of his motion. It makes it look more believable. And just Eggman's little... look at his expression as he transitions here. Look. And you can see that he knows that it's Sonic even before he even looks. You can see he's like, oh, god damn it, it's that blue hedgehog again. And then we get the wonderful animation on the machine. Which, again, like, getting this stuff to work convincingly together is kind of hard. Like, I've seen my animator friends struggle to do it, because you have to pick and choose the frames that you choose to render so carefully. By the way, when Sonic speeds into the screen here, notice the use of speed lines. All these little scribbled lines, they help to sell the power of his motion as he transitions into the camera, as well as that little camera wobble helps to sell the power, and then the dust that he kicks up behind him. And this is actually also pretty freaking hard to do, because you have to sell the idea that this thing that is way too close, you can't see his body motions, you can't see what he does with his legs or with really much of what's going on with his body. Nonetheless, it manages to sell the power and speed of Sonic taking off. And that's also kind of difficult. But something I do like is that as he's running towards Eggman, first of all, it's just an adorable little run cycle, but he's not being like a blur. He's not the blue blur. He's not like speed of sound kind of super speeding ahead. He still moves at something approaching a understandable clip, which I kind of like, because it makes this comic timing. As he's like, yeah, Eggman, I'm gonna get you because I'm Sonic and I'm cool. Oh, no, wait, that's a big machine, actually. Oh, my God! I love his little stop here. Is like, I've made a huge mistake. Oh, no! And then, once again, smear frames as he gets whacked out of the screen. His hand deforms completely. And again, notice the choice of rendering frames here for the machine. Because the swing of the machine has to be really powerful, it's pretty much, it just goes from one position to the other in one single frame, and that's what makes the motion feel so snappy, is that there's no smear here, unfortunately. That's something they might do with the machines more, is actually give them smear frames as well. That might be pretty cool, but like, that's how they sell the snappishness of of what's going on here, but this is also where you can kind of really tell that it's computer animated, because see how the drills settle in, and as they're settling in, they keep spinning perfectly, and the shape is retained perfectly, which is something that a traditional animator, even the really good ones, would struggle to do while the thing is in motion. And then just the little visual gag here of the rings falling out. That's a lovely little touch. And now watch the timing as Sonic comes crashing down. Because the timing is, we get this establishing shot of Tails, and he doesn't come crashing down immediately. We linger just a little bit on Tails just doing Tails things, and then bam! He comes jumping in. And that, to me, that makes the scene, just a tiny little pause before showing him touching down, makes the scene so much funnier. Because it's kind of like, oh, are we just cutting back to Tails? Is Sonic not going to be... Okay, there he is. Just his expression is going down. Oh, that's lovely. And you can see Tails, like, he's not even shocked. He's not even like, oh my god, what happened to you? He's like, yeah, that was probably gonna happen, actually. And then a lovely expression. This is also the thing I love about... This is also the thing I love about these shorts, is that they make Sonic so expressive. Sonic and all his friends are so expressive, which is something where the modern games, and I'm sorry if you're a modern Sonic fan, I have never been and I never will be, the modern Sonic games doesn't allow Sonic to be a punchline. They don't really let him be a visual punchline in the same way that these animated shorts do, where Sonic actually gets to have his nose kind of slowly come out of the sand like that, which is also a lovely little detail. Like, look at the motion his nose goes through as he pops his head out of the sand. He's like, that feels like a Monday morning to me. And the way he lifts his eyebrow there, I was like, yeah, do you want to laugh at me? What? And Tails, of course, just happy to help his friend. And here, a lovely subtle bit of animation as Sonic... Take a look at what his eyes do as he looks at the hand. They just do these tiny little twitches back and forth, as so he's kind of scanning the situation out a bit and determining, how am I going to respond to that hand? Am I going to play it cool, or am I just going to take the hand of my good friend? And you can see him make a decision with a smile. Right, and that's the setup that we discussed earlier. We set up that Sonic introduces himself to Tails, or reintroduces himself, as it were, by playing the cool guy, by playing Speed of Sound, Too Fast for the Naked Eye, Sonic the Hedgehog, hey, what's up? And then we get the payoff on that, which is that Sonic actually can't handle Eggman alone. He needs his friend, and so when he decides to accept Tails' help, it's Tails who's inviting him up. Like, it's Tails who's inviting him to come fight Eggman with him. It's not Sonic who's allowing Tails to come with him. It's Tails saying, hey, pick yourself up, buddy, we got this. Let's go. And again, that kind of subtle shit is just my jam, because it's such a good way to explain their relationship to each other. It's such a good way to explain their friendship, that like, it's not just Sonic playing cool and Tails being a fanboy. They are genuinely friends who help each other and pull each other up. That's so good. It's just, I love it. It's so good. Okay, back to Eggman, and once again, Eggman's expressions are also just kind of lovely. I love the way they use the eyebrows and the glasses to really create these squished down and very wide expressions. Because you can see he gets stretched out a little bit as he goes up. You can see the eyes especially get stretched out a little bit, and then he kind of settles. His mustache kind of follows him up, which makes him look a little bit like a peacock or something, which is a lovely detail. And I could watch this all day, but look at the way they transition once again from, like, when they do Sonic in his spin form, and here's a little animation mistake where Sonic appears on top of Eggman's beard, which is not supposed to happen, or mustache rather, why am I saying beard? When Sonic is a spinball, like, they don't bother animating a whole bunch of cycling spin frames, they just animate the iconic shape of Sonic in a spinball, and then they kind of, you can see, look at these two quills at the top of Sonic's ball right now. Look at those two quills. You can see how they naturally transition into forming his hair, and that helps sell the idea that he's unfolding, that he's unfurling, because you can, there's an object there that you can track that's consistent from one frame to another, and you can see his hair is so much bigger, and then he kind of, his quills are so much bigger, and then they grow a little bit shorter as he transitions into regaining his normal form. And again, he's so squishy and bouncy. It's so charming and lovely. By the way, it's also really effective use of the camera shake. Like, for most of these shorts, the vast majority of it, the camera is extremely steady. You get these very solid held shots. Like, there's no affectation of being handheld camera or anything, but then when they need to sell an impact, that's when they do the little camera bounce. Which is, from a directorial perspective, it's a really solid choice. Because it allows him to do something like this, where Eggman reacts to a screen shake. We don't know what's happened, but just even without sound, we can tell, okay, something impactful has happened, because that has been set up for us multiple times, that whenever the screen shakes, that means something hard has had, something has had a powerful impact on something else. In this case, that something is Tails. And again, you can see how they use a continuum. You can see how his feet appear first as he touches down. And then you can see it's the tails for Tails that really transition him from being a ball into being the little fox, which is a very clever way to do it. You can also see that the tufts of hair on the top of his head kind of emerge out of his tails, like out of that same shape before resolving into the actual character. And lots of squash and stretch going on here as he comes back out into his combat pose. And here is another wonderful... Again, it's this thing of lingering just a little bit too long. Like, we don't go directly into the action. We linger on this shot, watching Eggman kind of go, wait, hang on. 2 is more than 1. Oh, God! Ah! And it's that comedic timing is just, for me, that's so freaking on point. Because he's just kind of like, well, this is probably going to be really bad for me. And then... because the stillness of that moment is followed by extremely rapid motion, like bang, 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 and Eggman just getting kind of bitch slapped back and forth, essentially, which is just really well done, I think. Speaking of things that spin, here's something interesting going on, because they're combining 3D animation and 2D animation. We've still got the 3D drill going on, but over the top of that, they have layered these cycling frames of speed lines, which helps without actually speeding up the motion of the drill. Like, if you take a look at how fast the grooves are proceeding down the drill, which is weird, by the way, since if it's drilling into the earth, they should be moving upwards. They don't change speed, they don't go any faster, but the animators have, instead of having to render the drill going much faster, which is difficult because, again, they have limited frames to do this, so it's hard to get that 3D model to look like it's moving fast without giving it a whole bunch of extra frames, which makes it look too smooth, which makes it look uncanny valley, like it doesn't belong in the same universe. So the solution to that problem, a whole bunch of speed lines that just sell that the drill has actually powered up and is moving a lot faster, even though in reality the drill is moving at exactly the same speed it has been. And again, you can see, again, it's that same, whoa, I'm about to fall over motion. It's exactly the same one as the one they used on the plane. And that's a lovely continuum, like that every time Sonic, the ground shakes underneath him and he's about to fall over, he uses that particular animation from inside the games. And that's just a lovely little detail that I'm really pleased that they managed to remember. And again, a little bit of subtle facial acting as Tails, he sees Sonic is in trouble, right? Sonic can't move because he's being immobilized by all the ground moving around him. And then Tails sees Sonic is in trouble, and then that little dash of the eyes up, and then that moment when he decides, okay, I'm gonna be Action Tails for a moment. And it's a lovely little bit of animation when they spin his tails into, you know, being the helicopter blades that they're supposed to be. They kind of merge together and get squished a little bit, and then they turn into this complete motion-smeared blur, which really works very well. But unlike the motion where Sonic was dashing into the frame earlier, here, there's no speed lines. They use a blur effect on the background instead, which is less powerful, which also keeps, you know, Tails' relative power level in terms of speed just a little below what Sonic displays, which is a lovely little touch. And I love these two, like these little shaky I can't gain my footing frames are just, they're lovely and charming, because again, it kind of sells that Sonic isn't a super badass cool guy, he's just kind of a dork who's trying to regain his footing, and it's just lovely. And as Tails comes in to save him once again, smear frames, really no need to use anything else. And speaking of and I love the expressiveness of Eggman's mustache. When he's happy, I got him, and it's like, oh, wait, where is he? They kind of drop down, and that's a lovely little bit of expression as well. To use the mustaches essentially as secondary eyebrows. And I love that when Eggman looks up here, Sonic is already in the process of swinging back and forth. Like, he's building up the momentum that he's going to be using in order to do their ultimate super attack, which is this massive spin. This is a move, by the way, that you have already seen them use if you have watched the Sonic Mania animated intro. This is exactly the same move that they use in that animated intro, where Tails tosses Sonic further across the weird stage that they're running through. And here again, you can see how they transition from the regular form into the spinning around, where they're using Sonic's feet as they transition into this double-colored motion blur. And you can see that the feet then get blurred out and become part of the general motion blur. And then, as it speeds up, and these are just lovely and creative. Like, again, something that's really difficult with smear frames like this is to make them look convincingly like they're all rotating in the same direction. Like that they're not wobbling back and forth, but that they're actually spinning. And that's something they manage by constantly switching the mass of color around. You can see how it changes side from being orange mostly on the bottom, and then it kind of switches orange mostly on the top, and then it goes around orange on the bottom, orange at the top. And that's what helps sell the rotational motion of this smear, which is just so freaking good. And you can see here as it's mostly, and again, that little moment of quiet before the impact, which makes the comedy so much nicer, because we get some time to take in the situation, and Eggman is like, what's going on over here? And the orange smear, now, the smear is primarily orange, because Tails is the primary factor here, but Sonic is still represented by these little blue dot smears that kind of appear all around it, which reminds us that he's in there, while saving some labor by not having to animate these super complicated, this super complicated blur all the time. You can see Eggman's reaction, nice, like, the way he kind of sinks down into his seat. Oh, wait, no, I recognize that. That's actually really, really bad. And then these are also something I love. These are borrowed directly from anime, impact frames, which in anime is particularly used to sell impact. But notice what they do with the colors. The red of Sonic's shoes and the blue of his quills are the primary colors that are being used here, along with, of course, black, white, and a little bit of orange to really sell the power of the hit there. And it takes place like an explosion that kind of... You can see how everything expands outwards all the time, and that really sells the explosive impact of what's going on. And then we get the classic anime quiet frame, where we can see the impact of what has just been done. And everything kind of moves in slow motion as things progress down. And again, once again, that signature quiet moment before the comedy punchline. You can see Eggman is like... See if we can get that. Yeah. Naha! It'll take more than that to beat me, you little blue menace. Oh, wait. Actually, this is not going to be good for me either. Ah! And Eggman goes out of the frame in exactly the same way that Sonic did. And that, by the way, is another little important bit of setup. That Eggman leaves the scene the same way that he knocked Sonic out. Eggman goes out the exact same way. And that's important because he's going to land... Well, it's going to determine where he lands. Let's put it like that. And then this last lovely little bit of character interaction, which again, when you have such limited animation to work with, you kind of have to be careful about when the characters move. And you can see, especially here, these motions where Sonic moves, Tails moves, Sonic moves, where there's like you introduce a little bit of asynchronous movement, where on some frames one character stands still, on other frames they move at the same time. Because if they move at the same time on all of the frames, then you get animation that can kind of look a little bit stiff and lifeless. And if they move with the same timing, if you think back to 1920s cartoons, like the really old Mickey Mouse Silly Symphonies cartoons, where you would often have these grand scenes of characters all moving in time to some music or something like that. They always look pretty good, but they also look very kind of flat and robotic, almost like they were little puppets that were being led around by some kind of mechanism. And that's the thing you risk if you have too much animation that happens on the same frames. You can see here, Sonic moves, Tails moves, Sonic moves, Tails moves, and there's just a little bit of asynchronicity where you can see they move on slightly different timings, which is how they managed to sell the idea that these characters are individuals who are not moving according to the same beat. And again, I just love how effectively, just like the last short did a fantastic job of setting up the kind of playground rival relationship between Sonic and Eggman, this short does such a great job of setting up the relationship between Tails and Sonic, because you can see here by the end, and again, this is a little mini storyline that's happening within the story. Just as Sonic introduced himself by playing the cool guy, Tails gets to end by putting on a little bit more of a cool guy demeanor, like by matching up to Sonic's "yeah, I'm the coolest in the world" kind of attitude. And that little bit of character progression is just such a nice bit of subtle visual storytelling. I love it. And then we close on the laugh frame like a classic cartoon. Anyway, I've talked about this. This is a 2-minute animation short. I've managed to stretch it out into half an hour. I think that is pretty good for a day's work. If you would like to make me not do videos like this again, or indeed make me do more videos like this, you can head over to Patreon, where on a regular basis, my supporters have an opportunity to vote on some of the video topics that I cover. An updated total on where we are right now, a video about the Dark Souls bosses is winning right now, where I will try to analyze their character designs while also fighting them in combat in the game. Closely followed by a video about the Yordles of League of Legends, trying to explore where they came from, what happened to their aesthetic, why do they look the way they do, why are they so weird and disparate and kind of disconnected as character designs, and where are they headed, and then one on the character design of the Metal Gears of Metal Gear, that is, the big-ass nuclear-powered robots that are the kind of main, not antagonist, but one of the main subjects of the whole series. But if you're not interested in supporting me on Patreon, that is 110 million billion% totally okay. I'm just super happy that some people have chosen to. Adam Coxwell, Yamasuya, Morgan Hillsman, Soulstep, Aaron Chamberlain, Daniel Wesh, Kim Anderson, all of you, River especially, who runs the esports wiki, which is an incredibly important resource for people in the esports space, something that is worth supporting. Anton Larson, Michael Carmody, Jean-Baptiste Rossi, Flamespitter, Cameron Taylor Nips, and so on, and all of you. And I'm excited for updating the Patreon crawl with the new supporters that have come in this month, because it's going to be fun to have some new names to say. Anyway, I think it's probably time for me to stop talking, so thank you very much for watching. You can comment if you are so inclined. You can subscribe, and there's a like button. And, I mean, don't tell anyone this, but I heard that if you click the dislike button, the CIA will instantly know where you are, and maybe they'll send a killer robot. Like, you don't know. The CIA, they could do anything. They're crazy. They're insane. There's no one can check their power anymore. Like, the moment you click that dislike button, I mean, you can do it if you want to, but I'm just saying, your fate is in your hands. My name has been TV Sky, and thank you very much for watching. I will see you in the next video.